Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being on our program today. As always, we have guests that always have some bit of controversy in them, and this is one of them. But it's great controversy because it makes us think, it makes us wonder, it makes us look at things from a whole different perspective. And it's just been an honor to have Dr. Alvaro Huerta on the show several times, podcasting, webcasting. And it's always a thrill because I always walk away thinking I didn't see that perspective, or I didn't see that thing coming, or I hadn't thought of it that way. So I love having him on the show. He is right now posted an article, Huffington Post, called President Trump, the Hustle 2.0. And Dr. Alvaro is a urban planning and ethnic studies scholar, expert on public policy, Latino-Latina immigration, informal economy, and ethnic economies. And he's at Cal State Polytechnical Pomona.
Right.
Yeah, State College. So thank you very much for being here with us, Dr. Huerta. And 2.0, that means there was a 1.0, there was a 2.0, and you're saying that President Trump is a hustler. What is a hustler, por favor?
Well, well, first of all, thank you very much for having me on your show. It's a really great show, and I think you educate a lot of Latinos, especially the youth, on how to get ahead in life and be more than just average and try to be the best that they can be. So I appreciate that. So I grew up in Ramona Gardens housing projects, and it was an environment where I met a lot of hustlers. So, you know, hustling and being a hustler has both positive and negative connotations. So somebody can be a hustler, like hustling for money or selling goods, or like street vendors, for example. They're hustlers. They get out there. They wake up early in the morning and they're always hustling, you know, to make a buck. And then there's other hustlers that pretty much want to take advantage of you. You know, they lend you money and knowing that they're not gonna, or they borrow money from you knowing that they're not gonna pay you back. Or they'll say something and they'll brag about something and they're just trying to hustle you. So pretty much hustlers are people that try to take advantage of you for their own self-interest. And it's not just people from the streets, you know, like where I grew up, and I feel like, you know, that's still part of my identity, even though I have a, you know, Ph.D. from UC Berkeley. I don't feel like I'm superior or better than anybody from the streets, because that's where I come from. But that's how I learned about hustling and being hustled. But also you see a lot of politicians that they pretty much hustle people. They say one thing and they do something else. Right? So they promise people one thing to get elected, and once they get elected, then they do something else. So in essence, a hustler is somebody who says or does anything just to get the vote or get their political agenda forward without any consequences, without any guilt. Without any remorse in terms of, you know, what they're doing, like in reality, taking advantage of others.
The point that I get from you is that they're doing it with no remorse. They're doing it totally for self, but they make it sound like, you know, I'm going to help you, but they already know that, you know, this is not going anywhere on anyone's benefit except themselves. So what I'm trying to understand here is that you're associating that the hustler mentality, not talking about people that, you know, work very hard, but a hustler that's out to cheat people, is the same concept in the White House as it is out in the street in the projects.
Right, definitely. And you know, someone like Donald Trump, he perfected that. You know, he talks about the art of the deal. He actually didn't write it. You know, somebody wrote it for him. But before he was president, you know, he pretty much hustled people. He hustled the American voter, the white working class, in letting them believe that he was out for their self-interest. And in reality, I mean, if you look at all his appointees, they're millionaires and billionaires. It's amazing, you know, how much money they have and the much influence. And they don't represent anything to the majority of people that he was trying to persuade to vote for them, you know, which is pretty much white working class people.
So what you're saying is that he hustled his way in.
He hustled his way in, and that's the only way you can. You could say he's a con artist, or he's a huckster, salesman. You know, you could phrase it differently, but he pretty much is someone, this is the only way you can understand him, is someone that doesn't really believe in what he says, and he'll say anything and do anything just to get elected or get his way. So a lot of times people get confused because they take his word for it. Right? So for example, he'll say, like, NAFTA is bad, it's the worst deal in the history of trade deals in the United States, it's the worst thing. And then he gets into office and all of a sudden he realizes that NAFTA is something that there's business in the United States, business people in the United States that benefit from NAFTA. And all of a sudden he gets a call from Mexico and Canada, and now he's going to negotiate, and NAFTA is not that bad after all. And so people get frustrated and they'll say, well, he's flip-flopping or anything like that. No, he's not flip-flopping. He's a hustler. He just hustled people. He never meant it to begin with.
You know, other people in history, and I'm putting you a little bit on the spot here. Mm-hmm. Can you tell me someone else that you also associate in your mind as having been a hustler, so they can get sort of different perspectives?
Well, I think a hustler would be someone even like Barack Obama. You know, this is someone that I supported in being the first African-American president. And he always talked good about immigrants and embracing them. But at the end of the day, Barack Obama deported more immigrants than any president in the history of the United States. You know, more than George W. Bush. You know, he deported 2.7 million immigrants, undocumented immigrants. So he hustled his way to not to the office, but he hustled his way to get the Latino vote. You know, when he was desperate to get reelected, he was going to lose, but he needed that Latino vote, and so that's when he introduced the executive order for young people, for the Dreamers. So he hustled his way, knowing that that was one way to appease the Latinos. But at the end of the day, he's deported, and he'll probably deport more people than Trump will. You know, because I don't think Trump is going to deport that many people, even though he says he was. I don't think he's going to do it. You know?
Well, the way the farmers are going, and the way I'm reading it, is that even though the farmers voted for him, the farmers are really getting hurt, especially down in the South, where they can't get enough workers. So I see that going on constantly. I'm hearing that conversation. So would most people say, you know, and I'm sort of very generalizing, I don't want to do that, but right. I will for a moment. Every politician everywhere in the world is a hustler.
I think so. I think that's part of the characteristic of the position. You know, they seem to be sincere when it comes to elections, but at the end of the day, it has to do with them getting elected and getting and passing anything that has to do with their reelection. So they're not really interested in the public good. They're more interested in their self-interest. So it is a general pattern. The thing that differentiates Trump more than anybody is that he's perfected it. Like he's mastered the hustle. So he's somebody that has done it to a level that is unconscionable. You know, that most people, especially the media, are dumbfounded because they don't know how to deal with people like that, because they take them seriously, and you can't take somebody like that seriously. You can't trust them.
So a hustler, you know, you typically find one out in the streets, the old, right. What is it? The pea under the 3 cups, and they rotate them.
Right,
and
if you get
That's what I associate as the hustle. You know, it's intentional, whether it be with cards or, you know, they lead you on that you're winning and winning until they lead you up to a point, and then they know that they're setting you up for that.
Right.
What's the movie also that they did? It wasn't called The Hustle. It was Robert Redford and someone
Tom
else.
Cruise, and I think Robert Redford and Tom Cruise.
Yeah, everybody's sort of hustling everybody, is setting them up, and then that ultimately it was to cheat them from behind. So it's an old plot in movies.
Right.
What you're seeing is that we have finally come to a master of a masters of the hustlers.
Yeah, definitely. You know, Trump has perfected it. See, I think the problem is that when the problem that the media has, and they're also complicit in it, but they try to take him at his word, and they try to say, well, he said one thing and then he contradicts himself while he's flip-flopping, and they try to understand that. And when you try to understand a hustler, you don't get what they're trying to do to begin with, because that's part of the hustle. That was their intention to begin with. So he'll say some things like when Trump was a candidate, the first thing he said is that Mexicans are rapists and murderers and criminals. He doesn't really believe that, but he said it to get attention. All the attention was on him. So that was part of the hustle. And people, even the Latinos, they fell in the trap. So they're trying to explain, no, we're not all murderers, we're not all criminals, that we're good too. It's like don't go that route, because you're buying into the argument, like you're buying into the trap, because he's doing it to get the attention, and he did. Like he sucked all the air out of the oxygen. So that was to be provocative, to say statements that he doesn't believe. He's doing it on purpose, and this idea of taking him at his word is just preposterous, because you can't. With someone like that, part of the premise of a hustler is you can't trust them. Like anything they say, literally, you cannot trust. Even if they're telling the truth, you can't trust because of their past experiences.
Well, if I understand you correctly, you can't tell if they are telling the truth.
Right, exactly.
There's no foundation, because everything is up for grabs. Everything can be interpreted, in any way, shape, or form. Having the experience, like you said earlier, that you lived in the projects, you lived amongst hustlers. Can you sort of give me an indication what happens as they continue the hustling aspect? Does it end? Does it continue? Nothing happens? What is the evolution of it?
Well, that's a great question. I think a lot of what the problem in the streets is that, so someone is hustling someone. So let's say somebody wants to buy some drugs, for example. So, I grew up in Ramona Gardens, and they would sell PCP, for example. When I was there, it was the capital of PCP in Los Angeles at the time. And so somebody goes and buys some PCP, for example, and says, well, I'll pay you tomorrow. Like they're hustling the drug dealer. And if it doesn't pay, then there's consequences, right? So there's like physical. And so they people like that will, in the streets, they'll pay. It'll catch up to them. Nobody can escape it. It's like the mafiosos, like eventually.
You don't hustle the hustlers.
Right. You don't. I mean, even like Al Capone and people like that, they're always hustling. They're always trying to make deals. But at the end of the day, they all pay for it. I mean, it'll come back to them, because of the consequences of the streets, or of the hustle itself. I mean, we're seeing this right now with Trump, with the Russia thing, and Flynn and all these associates that were in contact with Russia. So eventually, that's going to come back to them. Is it going to get to Trump? I don't think so, because they control the House and they control the Senate. But some people are going to fall. They're going to fall on their sword, and they're going to pay the consequences of trying to hustle the American public and making deals with Russia at a time where they shouldn't have any contacts. So there is consequences, and everybody pays, or most people pay for it. But what I see that a lot of people are naive, is that they don't know that they're being hustled. That's what I'm trying to enlighten people.
Oh, I see. So what I'm learning, the idea is that if I move myself in thinking and saying, okay, I'm being hustled, I'm being finagled, I'm being fin-flanged, and right. I look at it from that perspective, then things start to make sense. But as long as I'm sort of in here like some other president that is trying to formulate some basic policy,
right,
and going through the process, then all of a sudden I'm off guard, and I'm the one who's sort of falling behind.
Right. Yeah.
You're telling me, catch up with the great game here. You're being hustled.
You're being hustled, and you're getting distracted, and you all of a sudden, like Sessions, Attorney General Sessions was in trouble. He was on the ropes. And then all of a sudden Trump says, wow, Obama tapped my phones. So everybody and their mother is following this argument Obama tapped my phones, but it's part of the hustle. You're being distracted. But the media is complicit in it. They're not that dumb. I think they're complicit in it because of the ratings, and they have some economic, benefits to it. But there's no Obama tapping phones, and even if eventually there isn't, Trump's going to say okay, and then nothing happens to him. Like nothing happens. And what does happen is that Sessions is off the hook. There's no more attention on him lying to Congress that he didn't have contact with Russia, which he did. He had two meetings, and during the hearings, with the confirmation hearings, he admitted he didn't disclose that information.
A lot of people would say, and I have to take this issue at heart, that some people say that, karma will come back. But that's a philosophy. That's not necessarily a judicial system. Right. And it's more of a hopeful thing. I pick up a little bit that from you, or is that where you're going with this? Like sooner or later, this is going to unravel?
No, I don't believe in karma or anything like this metaphysical like that. When I said about like the people in the streets, or even drug dealers, or even like people like Al Capone that would hustle, like they'll hustle each other in terms of like other drug dealers, and like make a deal but backstab them. I mean, that's kind of what I'm getting at. Like they say something but they do something else. So I don't, in those type of environments in the streets, the consequences are real because it'll catch up to you. And it's not going to be a conversation. That's kind of like I invited Trump one day when he was talking about Mexicans. I said, come to my neighborhood with all bodyguards and say that to the face of people where I come from and see what happens to you. I'm not someone who believes in violence. I don't advocate violence. But if you say something like that Mexicans are murderers and criminals and rapists to a Mexican that grows up in the streets, there's going to be consequences that you're going to regret. So like this whole bravado tough guy, there's no tough guy. He's not a tough guy. He's a hustler. What's the toughest thing this guy has ever done? Like had a pillow fight with his nanny. I mean, there's no tough guy. Anybody can talk tough, but what lived experiences do you have that demonstrate that? I'm against war and I'm against wars, but I respect people like McCain that went to war and was captured and survived and didn't. He had an opportunity to leave. They gave an opportunity, but he stayed so that he wouldn't leave his troops behind, because he was a commander. So I respect that. That's a tough guy. So when he says something, I listen to him in regards to those issues. But someone like Trump says something and acts tough, but he's never been in the military. He's never lived in the streets. He doesn't know what poverty is. So a lot of the things that he says or done, there's not going to be any consequences because of his privilege, and because of his position in power, and because the people that he's around with are the ones that are in charge of charging him, which is not going to happen.
But let's talk about McCain just a little bit. Not specifically him, but I'll use him as an example. He was being attacked considerable in many ways during the election. He was used as an example. Now he seems, for all intents and purposes, it sounds like he's supporting everything that Trump does. Was he hustled? Were people like him hustled through the process? I mean, I tend to think politicians sort of know the game a little bit more than that. What happened?
No, McCain is part of the problem too. He's part of the problem. I think he understands, like him and like Marco Rubio and Ted Cruz that Trump savaged during the primaries. I mean, he literally went after their families, their dignity, and the next day they are voting for him and applauding him. So they don't have any morality. They don't have any. Their only morality is getting reelected. They don't have any principles. The only reason I bring them up is this idea when it's part of this hustle that Trump has about being a tough guy. He's not a tough guy. Like McCain is a tough guy. I don't agree with anything he says, but that guy is tough. I mean, you got to give the guy credit. He was tortured. Personally, like if I have a paper cut, I will leave. That would be enough for me to like, okay, it's fine. Whatever whatever they want, just so I can escape that. But in terms of his behavior, he's no different than the rest of them.
Unfortunately, you know, I'm wrestling with the question, but I have to ask the question.
Oh, that's fine.
Are we going to go to Trump Hustler 3.0, 4.0, 5.0? Is this going to continue in your view?
It's going to continue through, if he doesn't get impeached, which I don't think he's going to get impeached because Congress has to impeach him. It's going to continue for his first term. But if the Democrats are smart and they run somebody that's strong and somebody that doesn't have that much baggage like Clinton, like Hillary, then I think he's beatable. Joe Biden, I think he's one guy that can beat him because of his working class roots. And I don't say this because I'm not a Democrat; I'm an independent. But it has to be somebody that has the working class roots that can stand up and say, well, I'm from Scranton. I have a working class background, and I know what it is to be poor and suffer. So if you get somebody else who's just tries to debate more on the issues and gets into more like the more intellectually sophisticated with policy, they're going to lose because that's not the game. The game is to appeal to the working class, and the working class doesn't think like that.
So, again, I'm picking up some vibes here. So what I think I'm hearing is that we're going to continue to be hustled, if not by Trump, by someone else.
By someone else, but I think he's perfected it to the degree that he's the most dangerous out there. Like I said, I don't think the Russia thing is that bad. I think it's good that we have ties with Russia to the extent that it avoids a war in World War III. I think what's devastating more than anything is like the environment, deregulation, things of that nature, healthcare. So as long as there's distractions and he keeps hustling us on secondary issues, then the public is going to pay the price, like in healthcare, for example, that we see right now. You see people like Paul Ryan, even like Vice President Pence, they come off as reasonable. They come off like as good guys and everything, but they're actually just as bad as Trump in terms of their philosophy or their morality in pushing an agenda that's against working people, poor people, working class white people, not just Latinos or African Americans. So I think they're pretty bad, and to a certain degree, I prefer a Trump. I prefer to deal with somebody like a Trump because where he stands. Others are worse because they come off as sophisticated, as smart, as compassionate, and they're pretty much pushing an agenda that's bad for poor people and working people.
Are you worried and concerned that a hustler, using your terms, has access to the football, the button for all nuclear holocaust?
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, even this talk with North Korea, the way Trump was talking, that was getting me nervous. North Korea, they're a desperate country. They're a poor country. They don't have anything but access to a nuclear weapon. So it's like a dog that is scared. If you push him too much, then he might use it because that's all he has. The dictator in North Korea. So to me, I wasn't worried about Trump using it. I was worried about Trump provoking North Korea to the point where they'll use the nuclear weapon because they feel that they're going to be bombed like Syria was bombed illegally by the United States. So that does worry me because what Trump doesn't understand is that words matter, and especially as a president, internationally. So if you say something, if you make it seem like you're going to attack a country or you're going to do something like that, that country might react preemptively. So I think that worries me when it comes to World War III or nuclear war, because that you can't go back.
No, it's a one-shot deal. It's all forward. Well, as we're coming to close, thank you very much again. As I mentioned at the beginning of the show, and I knew this was going to happen, you make us think. You make us, that you use your position as professor to make us think, see it. But I like the perspective, the idea. I'm going to have to go back and readjust my thinking, and I have to be honest, but I don't think I saw it from a hustler point of view.
Right.
But it starts to make sense that it's not so much that is just lying for the sake of lying. It's the idea that there's something being pushed on us, and while we're looking over here, someone is picking at our pocket from behind,
Right,
and we're
right.
not paying attention.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm learning from you.
Right, definitely. I mean, I think the advantage that I have over most people, most academics, actually all academics, if you ask me, I don't care if they're from Harvard, UCLA, or whatever, is that I was trained at UCLA and UC Berkeley, but I also was where I received my PhD, but I also have a PhD in the streets. So I have two PhDs, one from the streets of East LA and one from UC Berkeley. So I think that combination of street smarts and academic smarts makes me a little bit different. I tell my students, I said, when I was your age, academically speaking, they're more advanced than I am. In terms of technology, in terms of writing, in terms of critical thinking, they're 100 times more advanced. And they're all brilliant. But the advantage that I have over them or anybody else is that I come from the streets, and I'm able to use both, both instincts and not trust anybody at face value, and just be very cautious and trying to look at motives and look at assess people's intentions, and this is even for people not just like average people, because that's how I was trained. I mean, you can't, when you're growing up in the streets, you don't know who's going to backstab you, you don't know who's going to take advantage of you, you're always looking behind you, you always have like a knot in your stomach, like there's something's going to happen that's bad. So you're being conditioned in a certain way, and you behave in a certain way. And don't get me wrong, when I was young, I used to hustle people myself, and I'm not immune to that, but it was very petty stuff, like it's nothing big. But it's just that mentality. When you're in that type of mentality, you grow up and that's the morality. There's no right or wrong. The morality is based on your environment. But when it comes to the business world, when it comes to DC, they have their own morality in there. And I think the biggest mistake that people have, and I can see through it because I know these people, I've observed them and I live with them, is that politicians have mastered it, and they're actually worse than any homeboy that I've met growing up in the projects.
Yeah, well, they're working with $1 trillion budgets, and they're
right, yeah.
It's a whole different package. It's not the little petty stuff in here. But one of the things, and I did not grow in the barrio per se. I did not grow in the projects, but I did go to school in East Los Angeles. I went to Salesian High School.
Yes.
And one thing that I did get to see and sort of realize that a lot of deals go bad. And if you're in a bad neighborhood, chances are some of those deals are going to go down fast. They're going to go bad, and a lot of people are going to get hurt. Yeah. Those that were involved, and a lot of innocent people. And that's the part that I'm troubled with, and I have to agree with you. It does make sense to me that we're being hustled, and on a grand scale, and that it's being perfected every generation. But when deals go bad, like you said, whether it be North Korea, whether it be relationships, when somebody takes face value and says, this is what we're going to do, and it was always a hustle, and they do it, and they proceed on their own, and that says, no, that's not really what I meant, which I'm hearing a lot on the news. That sets the tone that it's a very, very, very dangerous neighborhood. And I'd get my stuff and get out of there, even if I had only my clothing. But where do you run when you're inside a country and you're seeing politics being played out this way?
No, definitely. And it's just to show. It's just to show people that we all must resist nonviolently. We all must organize. We all must get out there and make sure that the Democrats take back the House. To have that checks and balance.
Yes.
To be able to say, this is not a dictatorship. This is not a monarchy. You're not king. You're not King Trump. You're not CEO Trump anymore. This is not your company where you could do whatever you want and everything by executive order. So there's no checks and balance right now. The only thing that's balancing this hustler is the courts. The putting a stop to the Muslim ban, putting a stop to punishing cities that support sanctuary cities. That's the only thing that's saving us right now, like with the ACLU or anybody that files a lawsuit to prevent us, from being victimized by these unconscionable policies. Like I'm an atheist. I grew up Catholic. I did my first communion, but I'm an atheist. So I think it's bad, and I think it's immoral. That you ban an entire group of people just because of their religion. In this case, being Muslims. Just because of what one person or two people or even 1,000 people do, compared to 1 billion people. So we cannot treat anybody at that, like in generalized at a grand scale like that, and conduct policy that way. So I think the consequences are great. We're facing it every day, but people have to act and not take this lightly.
Your words have sort of moved me to see that a nice neighborhood can be turned into a very dangerous one if everybody's allowed to speak and do and hustle each other. After a while, if the trust is broken down,
right?
How do any of us really judge, how we can work together? And if that all falls apart because of one person's desire to manipulate a system, and it's not only Trump, but any person anywhere, the trust falls apart, and government at its basis falls apart. Like money is a trust system, and it's a very dangerous times. And I have to say, a lot to think about. I'm trying to do past and present and future all at the same time. But one thing I do thank you. I thank you for your constant articles, which I know you post Huffington, and I know you do it also in other magazines as well. So, and you make yourself available to follow up with that and give us an insight as to what you had in mind.
Well, thank you very much, Armando. I think you do a lot of great work, and you're not just a local citizen, you're a global citizen. So, I appreciate that. Give us that global perspective, and you're like a role model to the young people to not limit themselves to their their barrio, their neighborhood, and to see things more globally, and to have an open mind and not be limited to whatever whatever goes on in their neighborhood, to be more like a global citizen. So I think that's important.
Well, it's being able to talk to persons like yourself, people in Europe, people in Africa, different people who see it from different perspectives. Right. And you begin to see, but this hustle thing, it's a very serious point, and I'm glad you pointed it out. And that's what caught my eye when I saw your article, and I thought it comes from you, so it's got to be here. So thank you very much for being here with us. Ladies and gentlemen, we have Dr. Alvaro Huerta, Ph.D., Berkeley backgrounds, UCLA for a while. Now he's at Cal State Polytechnico Pomona. And I think your students and your community and all of us are better off having people like you that say, hey, wait a minute, let's look at this. Let's study it. Let's be critical thinkers about it. So I thank you for that, and I thank you for your time, Alvaro.
Muchas gracias, Armando. Appreciate it.
Andale pues. Okay, be careful, and we'll keep talking. And I hope there is not a 3.0, but you let me know, dude.
Okay, thanks a lot.
Andale pues. Cuídate. Saludos.
Thank you.
Adios. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm Armando F. Sanchez. If you have any questions about this program, like to talk to Dr. Huerta, please contact me at lsacnational@hotmail.com. I welcome your perspectives. I'll share it with them, and hopefully he'll come back on another show and continue to sort of enlighten us, make us understand what at one time doesn't seem plausible, but unfortunately, we need to have a sharp mind and a sharp point to be able to look at it and protect ourselves, protect our country. Thank you.